Hello everyone. Welcome back to our channel. Fear is something every person experiences. It feels real, powerful, and sometimes even overwhelming. It can stop us from taking action, following our dreams, and becoming the person we want to be. But what if fear is not as real as it feels? What if fear is only a shadow? A shadow does not exist on its own. It appears only when there is light and something blocking it. In the same way, fear appears when our mind focuses on imagined problems, future uncertainties, and negative possibilities. Fear is not always reality. It is often a projection of the mind, shaped by our thoughts, desires, and interpretations. In this video, we will explore powerful lessons to understand fear and learn how to rise above it. Lesson 1. Fear exists only where you focus. The first and most powerful truth about fear is that it grows where your attention goes. Fear is not something that exists independently in the world. It is created and strengthened by your focus. Where your mind goes, your emotions follow. When you focus on negative possibilities, your mind begins to create images of what could go wrong. You start imagining failure, rejection, embarrassment, or loss. These imagined situations may feel real, even though they have not actually happened. This is how fear is born. For example, imagine you are about to try something new, like speaking in front of people or starting a new opportunity. Before you even begin, your mind may start asking questions like, what if I fail? What if people judge me? What if I make mistakes? These thoughts are not facts. They are possibilities created by your imagination. But when you focus on them repeatedly, your brain begins to treat them as real threats. Your body reacts with tension, nervousness, and hesitation. This is the power of focus. Fear is not always coming from reality. It is often coming from where your attention is placed. If you continuously focus on problems, your mind will create more problems. If you focus on risks, your mind will amplify those risks. But the opposite is also true. When you shift your focus, fear begins to lose its strength. For example, instead of focusing on what could go wrong, you can focus on what you can learn, how you can improve, and what action you can take. This simple shift changes your mental state. When your attention moves from fear to action, your mind becomes more solution-focused instead of problem-focused. Another important truth is that your brain cannot fully focus on two opposite things at the same time. You cannot be completely focused on fear and completely focused on action at the same moment. If your attention is on taking the next step, fear naturally becomes weaker. This is why people often feel less afraid once they begin something. Before starting, the mind creates many negative possibilities. But once action begins, the mind becomes engaged in the process, and fear starts to fade. This shows that fear is not fixed. It changes based on your focus. Another example can be seen in everyday situations. If you focus on past failures, your confidence becomes weak. You begin to believe that future attempts will also fail. But if you focus on past improvements, lessons learned, and small successes, your confidence becomes stronger. The same mind creates both fear and confidence. The difference is where you place your attention. Controlling your focus is like controlling a light. Wherever you shine the light, that area becomes visible and important. Everything else fades into the background. If you shine your attention on fear, it becomes large and powerful. If you shine your attention on growth, action, and learning, fear becomes smaller. This is why awareness is important. Many people are not aware of where their attention is going. Their mind automatically focuses on negative thoughts without questioning them. But once you become aware, you can choose where to direct your focus. You can gently bring your attention back to what matters. You can ask yourself, what is in my control right now? What action can I take? What can I learn from this situation? These questions shift your focus from fear to growth. Over time, this habit becomes stronger. Your mind becomes trained to focus on solutions instead of problems. And as this happens, fear begins to lose its power over you. The truth is simple. Fear grows when you feed it with attention. But when you take your attention away from fear and place it on action, learning, and progress, fear starts to fade like a shadow. And once you learn to control your focus, you gain control over fear itself. Lesson 2. Fear is created by imagination. Another powerful truth about fear is that most of it is created by imagination. The human mind has an incredible ability to imagine situations that have not yet happened. This ability can be useful for planning and creativity, but it can also create fear when it focuses on negative possibilities. Many of the fears people experience are not based on real events. They are based on imagined outcomes. For example, before starting something new, your mind may begin to create a story. It may imagine failure, rejection, embarrassment, or loss. You may see yourself making mistakes, being judged, or not succeeding. These images feel real in your mind, but they are only thoughts. Nothing has actually happened yet. Still, your body reacts as if the situation is real. Your heart may beat faster, your mind may feel tense, and you may feel nervous or anxious. This is the power of imagination. The mind creates a picture, and the body responds to that picture. This is why fear can feel so strong even when there is no real danger present. Another important thing to understand is that imagination often exaggerates reality. When the mind creates negative scenarios, it usually focuses on the worst possible outcome. It does not imagine small mistakes or manageable challenges. It often jumps directly to extreme situations. For example, if you are about to speak in front of people, your mind may imagine complete failure or embarrassment. But in reality, most situations are not that extreme. Even if you make a small mistake, people usually understand or do not pay as much attention as you think. But imagination does not show you this balanced view. It shows you a distorted version of reality. This is why fear often feels bigger than it actually is. Another powerful truth is that imagination works both ways. Just as your mind can create fear, it can also create confidence. If you imagine negative outcomes repeatedly, your fear becomes stronger. But if you imagine yourself learning, improving, and handling situations calmly, your confidence begins to grow. The same mind that creates fear can also create strength. The difference lies in how you use your imagination. People who struggle with self-belief often use their imagination against themselves. They create negative stories that limit their actions. But people who believe in themselves learn to guide their imagination in a positive direction. They focus on possibilities instead of problems. They imagine growth instead of failure. Another important way to understand this lesson is to separate thoughts from reality. Just because a thought appears in your mind does not mean it is true. Thoughts are not facts. They are simply ideas created by the brain. If you treat every negative thought as reality, fear becomes stronger. But when you recognize that these thoughts are only mental creations, you gain distance from them. You can observe the thought without believing it completely. For example, if your mind says, "I might fail," you can remind yourself, "This is just a possibility, not a certainty." This small shift reduces the intensity of fear. Another helpful approach is to focus on the present moment. Imagination often pulls you into the future, where problems have not yet happened. But when you bring your attention back to what you can do right now, fear becomes smaller. You begin to focus on actions instead of imagined outcomes. The truth is simple. Fear often feels real, but it is usually created by imagined situations that have not happened. When you understand this, you begin to see fear differently. Instead of being controlled by your imagination, you begin to guide it. And when you learn to control your imagination, you take a powerful step toward controlling fear itself. Lesson 3. Fear changes, based on interpretation. Another powerful truth about fear is that fear does not come only from situations. It comes from how you interpret those situations. Two people can face the exact same event, but their level of fear can be completely different. The situation is the same, but the meaning they give to it is different. This is called interpretation. Your interpretation is the way your mind understands and explains what is happening. And this interpretation directly shapes your emotions. For example, imagine two people are asked to speak in front of an audience. One person may think, "This is a chance to share my ideas and improve my confidence." Because of this interpretation, they may feel excited, even if they are slightly nervous. The second person may think, "What if I make a mistake? What if people judge me?" Because of this interpretation, they may feel strong fear and anxiety. The situation did not change. Only the interpretation changed. And that change completely altered the emotional experience. This shows something very important. Fear is not always created by reality. It is created by the meaning your mind gives to reality. Your brain constantly tries to understand situations quickly. It labels events as safe or dangerous, good or bad, success or failure. But these labels are not always accurate. They're based on past experiences, beliefs, and assumptions. For example, if someone had a negative experience in the past, their mind may interpret similar situations as dangerous, even if the current situation is not actually harmful. This creates unnecessary fear. But when you become aware of your interpretation, you gain the ability to change it. Instead of accepting every thought automatically, you can question it. You can ask yourself, "Is this situation really dangerous, or am I just thinking it is? Is there another way to look at this? What if this is an opportunity instead of a problem?" These questions open the door to new interpretations. For example, instead of seeing a challenge as a threat, you can choose to see it as a chance to grow. Instead of seeing failure as something negative, you can see it as a lesson. Instead of seeing criticism as an attack, you can see it as feedback for improvement. This shift in interpretation changes your emotional response. Fear becomes smaller and confidence becomes stronger. Another important truth is that interpretation can be trained. At first, your mind may automatically choose negative interpretations because it is used to focusing on problems. But with practice, you can guide your thinking in a more balanced and constructive way. Over time, your brain becomes used to seeing possibilities instead of threats. This habit reduces fear naturally. Interpretation also affects how long fear lasts. When you hold on to a negative interpretation, your mind continues to replay the situation again and again. This keeps fear alive. But when you change your interpretation, the emotional intensity begins to fade. The situation no longer feels as threatening. Another advantage of changing your interpretation is that it improves decision-making. When fear is based on a negative interpretation, it can stop you from taking action. But when you see the same situation as an opportunity, you become more willing to move forward. This allows growth to happen. The truth is simple. Events in life are neutral. It is your interpretation that gives them meaning. If your interpretation is negative, fear becomes strong. If your interpretation is balanced and growth-focused, fear becomes weaker. When you learn to question and change your interpretation, you gain control over your emotional response. And when you control how you interpret situations, you begin to control fear itself. Lesson 4. Fear disappears with action. One of the most powerful truths about fear is that fear feels strongest when you are standing still and thinking. But it begins to disappear the moment you take action. Fear grows in inactivity. When you are not taking action, your mind has time to imagine problems, create negative scenarios, and exaggerate possible outcomes. You begin to think about everything that could go wrong, and these thoughts make fear feel bigger than it actually is. This is why fear often feels strongest before you start something. Before speaking, before trying something new, before making a decision, the mind becomes full of doubt and hesitation. But something interesting happens when you take the first step. The moment you begin, your focus shifts. Instead of thinking about what might happen, your mind starts dealing with what is actually happening. This shift reduces fear. For example, imagine you are afraid of speaking in front of people. Before you begin, your mind may create many fears. You may imagine forgetting your words, making mistakes, or being judged. But once you start speaking, your attention moves to the present moment. You begin forming sentences, responding to the audience, and focusing on the task. As this happens, fear begins to fade. This shows that fear is often connected to imagination, while action is connected to reality. When you act, you replace imagination with experience. And experience is usually less frightening than imagination. Another important truth is that action gives you evidence. When you do something, you learn from it. You discover what works, what needs improvement, and how capable you really are. This real experience slowly replaces fear with understanding. For example, the first time you try something, it may feel difficult and uncertain. But after repeating it several times, your confidence increases. What once felt scary begins to feel normal. This is because action trains your mind. Your brain learns that the situation is not as dangerous as it first believed. Over time, fear loses its power. Another powerful benefit of action is that it builds momentum. The first step is always the hardest. But once you take that step, the next step becomes easier. And the more steps you take, the more your confidence grows. This momentum helps you move forward even when you still feel some doubt. People who wait for fear to disappear before taking action often remain stuck. They think, "I will start when I feel ready." But the truth is that feeling ready often comes after you begin. Confidence is created through action, not before it. Another important point is that action does not need to be perfect. Many people delay action because they want everything to be perfect before they begin. But perfection is not necessary. Even small actions can reduce fear. Taking a small step forward is more powerful than waiting for the perfect moment. Each small action weakens fear and strengthens confidence. Action also shifts your identity. When you act despite fear, you begin to see yourself as someone who is capable and courageous. This new identity builds self-belief. You no longer see yourself as someone controlled by fear. You see yourself as someone who can move forward despite it. The truth is simple. Fear grows when you think too much and act too little. But when you take action, fear begins to disappear. You replace doubt with experience, imagination with reality, and hesitation with progress. And once you understand that action is the cure for fear, you gain a powerful tool to overcome it in any situation. Lesson 5. Fear is linked to attachment. Another deep truth about fear is that fear is often connected to attachment. Attachment means becoming too dependent on a specific outcome, result, or expectation. When you strongly want something, you also begin to fear losing it. This is where fear is created. For example, if you are deeply attached to success, you may start fearing failure. If you are very focused on people's approval, you may start fearing rejection. If you are attached to comfort, you may start fearing discomfort or change. The stronger the attachment, the stronger the fear. This is why two people can face the same situation but feel very different levels of fear. One person may be relaxed and confident because they are open to different outcomes. But another person may feel anxious because they are too attached to a specific result. Attachment creates pressure. When your mind says, "This must happen," or "I cannot lose this," it creates tension. You begin to worry about what will happen if things do not go as planned. This worry turns into fear. For example, imagine someone going for an important interview. If they think, "I must get this job, otherwise everything will go wrong," they create strong pressure on themselves. This pressure increases fear and anxiety. But if they think, "I will do my best, and whatever happens, I will learn and move forward," their mind becomes calmer. The situation is the same, but the attachment is different. And that difference changes the level of fear. Another important point is that attachment often comes from identity. When people connect their self-worth to outcomes, fear becomes stronger. For example, if someone believes, "If I fail, it means I am not good enough," they will fear failure deeply. But if they understand that one result does not define their value, fear becomes weaker. They can face challenges with a more balanced mindset. Reducing attachment does not mean you stop caring about your goals. It means you care about your effort more than the result. You focus on what you can control instead of worrying about what you cannot control. You give your best, but you do not let the outcome control your peace of mind. This mindset creates freedom. When you are less attached to results, you become more relaxed and confident. You can take action without being controlled by fear. You perform better because your mind is calm. Another powerful benefit of reducing attachment is that it increases resilience. When you are not overly attached to one outcome, you can handle setbacks more easily. If something does not go as planned, you do not feel completely broken. You see it as part of the journey. This allows you to continue moving forward. Attachment also limits growth. When you fear losing something too much, you may avoid taking risks. You may stay in your comfort zone to protect what you already have. But growth often requires stepping into uncertainty. When you reduce attachment, you become more open to new opportunities. You are willing to try, learn, and improve without being controlled by fear of loss. Another important truth is that attachment is often based on illusion. We believe that a certain result will define our happiness or success. But in reality, life continues to change. New opportunities appear and new paths open. When you understand this, you stop placing too much importance on one single outcome. Your mind becomes more flexible and calm. The truth is simple. Fear is often not about the situation itself. It is about how much you are attached to the outcome. When you reduce attachment, you reduce pressure. When you reduce pressure, fear becomes weaker. And when you learn to focus on effort instead of results, you gain the freedom to act with confidence and clarity. That freedom is what allows you to move forward without being controlled by fear. Lesson 6. Fear controls those who avoid it. Another powerful truth about fear is that fear becomes stronger when you avoid it. Avoidance may feel comfortable in the moment, but it slowly gives more power to fear over time. When you avoid something that makes you uncomfortable, your mind learns an important lesson. It starts to believe that the situation is dangerous. For example, imagine someone who is afraid of speaking in front of people. The first time they feel nervous, they decide to avoid the situation. In that moment, they feel relief. Their fear disappears temporarily because they are no longer facing the situation. But something deeper happens inside the mind. The brain connects avoidance with safety. It learns that avoiding this situation keeps me safe. Because of this, the next time a similar situation appears, the fear becomes even stronger. The mind tries harder to protect you by increasing the feeling of fear. This creates a cycle. Fear leads to avoidance. Avoidance leads to temporary relief. Relief teaches the brain to avoid again. And the next time, fear becomes even bigger. Over time, this cycle can grow stronger. Situations that once caused small discomfort can begin to feel overwhelming. The area of your comfort zone becomes smaller because you keep avoiding anything that feels uncertain or difficult. This is how fear slowly takes control. But the opposite is also true. When you face fear, even in small ways, the mind learns a different lesson. It learns that the situation is not as dangerous as it first believed. For example, if the same person decides to speak in front of a small group, they may still feel nervous. But once they complete the experience, something changes. They realize that they survived the situation. They learn that their fear was bigger than the reality. This experience weakens fear. Each time they face a situation again, their confidence grows and their fear becomes smaller. This is how courage is built. Courage does not mean the absence of fear. It means moving forward despite fear. Another important truth is that avoidance limits growth. When you avoid situations that challenge you, you miss opportunities to learn, improve, and expand your abilities. You remain in familiar environments, but your potential stays limited. Growth always requires stepping into the unknown. It requires facing discomfort and uncertainty. Avoiding fear may feel safe, but it prevents progress. Facing fear may feel uncomfortable, but it creates strength. Another powerful benefit of facing fear is increased self-belief. Each time you face something that once scared you, you prove to yourself that you are capable. This builds confidence. You begin to trust your ability to handle difficult situations. Over time, your mindset changes. Instead of thinking, "I cannot do this," you begin to think, "I have faced challenges before, and I can handle this too." This shift in thinking is very powerful. Facing fear also reduces overthinking. When you avoid something, your mind continues to think about it again and again. The fear stays in your thoughts and grows larger. But when you face it, the unknown becomes known. You replace imagination with experience. And experience usually feels much less frightening than your imagination. Another important point is that you do not need to face fear all at once. You can start with small steps. Small actions are enough to begin breaking the cycle of avoidance. Each small step sends a message to your mind that you are capable. Over time, these small steps create big changes. The truth is simple. Fear becomes powerful when you run away from it. But when you face it, even slowly and gradually, it begins to lose its control. Avoidance feeds fear. Action weakens fear. And when you learn to face what once scared you, you take back control of your mind and your life. Lesson 7. Fear becomes power when you understand it. The final and most powerful lesson about fear is this: fear is not always your enemy. When you truly understand fear, it can become a source of strength and power. Most people see fear as something negative. They try to avoid it, fight it, or escape from it. They believe that fear is something that holds them back. But the truth is deeper. Fear is not just a weakness. Fear is a signal. It is your mind telling you that you are stepping into something unfamiliar, something important, or something that has the potential to change your life. In many cases, the things you fear the most are the things that can help you grow the most. For example, you may fear speaking in front of people, starting something new, taking risks, or stepping out of your comfort zone. But these are often the exact actions that lead to improvement, confidence, and success. Fear is like a sign pointing toward growth. When you begin to understand this, your relationship with fear changes. Instead of running away from fear, you begin to ask a different question. What is this fear trying to teach me? This question shifts your mindset. You stop seeing fear as something that blocks you, and you start seeing it as something that guides you. Another important truth is that fear shows you your limits. It reveals the areas where you feel uncertain or uncomfortable. But these limits are not fixed. They can be expanded. Every time you face fear, you push your limits a little further. What once felt difficult becomes easier. What once felt impossible becomes manageable. This process builds inner strength. Fear also helps you stay alert. In some situations, fear can protect you by making you more aware and focused. It can sharpen your attention and prepare your mind for action. When understood correctly, fear can improve your performance instead of reducing it. The key is not to eliminate fear, but to understand it. Another powerful benefit of understanding fear is that it removes unnecessary suffering. When people do not understand fear, they often resist it. They try to avoid it completely, which creates more anxiety. But when you accept fear as a natural part of life, it becomes easier to handle. You no longer feel overwhelmed by it. You simply observe it and move forward. This calm approach reduces the intensity of fear. Fear becomes something you experience, not something that controls you. Another important realization is that fear loses power when you stop labeling it as something negative. Instead of thinking, "This fear is bad," You can think, this fear is showing me something important. This shift in perspective transforms fear into a tool for growth. It becomes something useful rather than something harmful. Over time, you begin to develop a different identity. You no longer see yourself as someone who is afraid. You see yourself as someone who can understand fear and move forward despite it. This identity builds strong self-belief. You trust your ability to handle challenges. You become more willing to take risks and explore new opportunities. The truth is simple. Fear is not the problem. Not understanding fear is the problem. When you understand that fear is a signal, a guide, and a natural part of growth, it loses its negative power. Instead of stopping you, it begins to push you forward. And when you reach this level of understanding, fear no longer controls your life. It becomes a force that helps you grow stronger, wiser, and more confident. That is when fear transforms from a shadow into a source of power. If you enjoyed this video and found these ideas powerful, make sure to like the video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel for more deep lessons about mindset and personal growth. Thank you for watching, and we will see you in the next video.